Olá, pessoal. Boa tarde. Aqui é o Alexandre Kuroda, da Arquiteto, sou cofundador aqui da Arquiteto. Muito obrigado aqui pela presença de todos. Hoje aqui é um dia muito especial. Estamos trazendo aí convidados muito especiais aqui, do escritório da Zaha Hadid e do BIC, né? Em comemoração aí ao Dia do Arquiteto, né? Então, dia 15, agora, nosso Dia do Arquiteto aqui no Brasil. Acabei de descobrir que esse é uma data aqui só de brasileiros, né? Então, fica ainda mais exclusivo para a gente, né? E, bom, falando um pouquinho sobre os nossos convidados, temos aqui o German, how do I say your surname? Bodenbender? Did I get it right?
Bodenbender, yes.
German Bodenbender. Ele é o gerente de tecnologia em design no BIC, com foco em design computacional e fluxos de trabalho de inteligência artificial para impulsionar a inovação e eficiência no processo arquitetônico. Ele possui sólida experiência em fluxos de trabalho BIM, ferramentas computacionais e processos de fabricações, tendo sido reconhecido como um dos 40 profissionais com menos de 40 anos com mais destaque no setor. Com experiência na implementação e gestão de soluções tecnológicas de ponta, German liderou com sucesso equipes no desenvolvimento e implementação de projetos de designs computacionais em diversos tipos de projetos arquitetônicos. E também temos aqui o Vishu Bhushan. Vishu é um associado na Zaha Hadid Architects, onde ele co-lidera o grupo de computação e design Zaha Code, líder de desenvolvimento de estruturas computacionais projetada para sintetizar geometrias de alto desempenho, otimização estrutural e modelagem paramétrica. Seus trabalhos na Zaha Hadid incluem concursos de arquitetura e designs, demonstradores de tecnologias, produtos, galerias, estádios, estações de metrô, edifícios residenciais, master plans e design para o metaverso e indústria de jogos. Vishu é mestre pela Architectural Association de Londres, no curso Design Research Lab, DRL. Também é professor de computação arquitetônica na University College of London, UCL. E só para me introduzir também, né, Alexandre Kuroda, cofundador aqui da Arquiteto. Fiz o mesmo curso do Vishu, né, então tenho o meu mestrado ali pela Architectural Association de Londres. O Vishu foi de um ano anterior ao meu, né, e lá que a gente se conheceu, além de a gente se conhecer lá do próprio escritório, onde eu trabalhei também, né, trabalhei um pouco na Zaha Hadid, né, e depois que passei por tudo isso, voltei para o Brasil e fundei a Arquiteto com o Thomas, né. So, introductions made. Só um detalhe, essa conversa vai ser em inglês, tá? Então, por favor, mas assim, a gente se vocês tiverem perguntas, tá? Mandem para a gente as perguntas pelo YouTube, tá? Que a gente vai selecionando e eu traduzo aqui para fazer as perguntas para eles, tá? Fiquem mais à vontade, tá? And then switching to English, Vishu, in German, thank you very much for being here with us at this podcast, commemorating in celebration for the Architects Day here in Brazil. Vishu, in German, Vishu, how are you doing? German?
Yeah, many thanks for the invite. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure being here and happy to be discussing with both you, Alex, and German. Yeah, looking forward to a good next hour of discussions.
Cool.
Yeah, same here. Boa tarde. That's how much I can say in Portuguese. But again, also thanks for the invitation. I guess we feel honored for you guys to be celebrating the Architects Day, inviting us as part of this celebration. So thanks a lot, and I think this also can become a celebration of ArcGen work as well, and the pioneering work you also guys pushing on the front of artificial intelligence, and also how Brazil now is also on the forefront of this, right? Leading the industry. So thanks for the invite.
Thank you, guys. You are making this celebration for the Architect Day much more special for this year. Thank you very much. So, starting by the global tendencies in architecture, I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think the tendencies, what are the most interesting tendencies in or trends in architecture that you have been seeing in the global scenario right now? I know, Vishu, you also have the is one of the tutors, right, at the DRL as well, apart from the UCL. So maybe starting with you and commenting on what you think are the trends and what's going on in tech and architecture.
Okay, cool. Yeah, in terms of trends, both at the academic level and at the office level, would be looking at like, one is like our machines are becoming so much more powerful. So one of the trends looking is to kind of speed of computational, like the speed of computing. So a lot of optimization and things like, where like previously when it took like a lot of time to run, all of those is getting enhanced and running much faster, and quite a lot of them much more real time, especially with the GPU computing and so on and so forth. And the other trend on the other side would be like, based on those compute powers of GPU, is to also do, and also the graphic cards available, is to do like AI and machine learning, right? So that's like another trend which is kind of developing, looking at image generations with Gen AI. But we are also currently focused on not only on the Gen AI part, but also something called game AI, where we are looking at game technologies and how that could be integrated into early stages of design or early stage of urban planning, etc. So currently, yeah, so those are kind of three like concurrent trends which are kind of interlinked with each other because of the technology which is available for each one of us now. And then apart from that, like the other novel space would be like looking at how to put these things onto the web, right? Like, so that it is much more democratized, more people can use it. So using Web3 technologies, making the metaverse, or making the Web 3D. So yeah, in general, very exciting time, and these are kind of the current things we are currently looking at. And yeah, look forward to hear what German has to say from there.
I mean, it's difficult to speak after Vishu from Saha, right? Which is one of the pioneers mostly on this. But I think for me, what is interesting is, my dad is also an architect, and he comes from a time where technology was not really, architecture was not really the front runner into technology and nor innovation, right? And then when I started thinking like how my dad as an architect operates almost his entire life, and it was his hand and his pencil, and he could have just built anything out of that, and it was incredible. And then how, for good or for bad, our digital ecosystem have grown and evolved drastically and becomes too wide and really complex, but that also opens an incredible amount of opportunities as well, right? So our digital footprint keeps expanding together with our digital capabilities and how much we can do. But it's important for us to be able to translate that digital expansion into quality improvement on projects, because sometimes you just make the whole digital ecosystem more complex, but that not necessarily makes the building better. So I think that's an interesting thought sort of on that. And then the amount of technology and how exciting, the fusing of technology into the design process, documentation, and construction has been overwhelming, but really fascinating at the same time. And also I feel like most of the tools before, they were really focusing on to be able to go either more complex or either faster, right? And now, because yes, we managed to increase the computing power and push the boundaries of how quickly we can start doing things or how complex operation we can start running, which is one general stream of things. But now lately with artificial intelligence, I mean, not really artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, per se, now we do have capability to also tap into a completely different set of things. Yes, you can also now simulate much faster because you're not simulating and computing, you're actually predicting, which is incredible. But also for me, this is incredible part to be able to capture knowledge that is being disseminated anywhere and now be able to sort of package it and give it to a lot of people. I mean, I do believe like the impact of like in-house trained large language models with company information, it's incredible, right? So for us, sort of the latest trends that has been really start affecting how do we work is, of course, on two major fronts. One thing is the diffusion side, and the other thing is the large language model side. I mean, those are the key two pillars. Then you have little satellites going around, but for us to be able to first start moving from classifying things to start generating things through generative AI has been a massive sort of flip. And then be able to start going through the journey of controlling that, because that's the journey we're all trying to be through. Okay, we can now generate things, but how would you control what do you want to generate it and inform that generation through our DNA as big or Saha? So I think for us, it's like, of course, we all started with the mid journeys and the things like that, and now we all quickly jump into stable diffusion and then conf UI and start training our models, creating our LoRa's, and started doing two things. One thing is going deep into the technology, but also, and probably the same happens to you guys, was also a political exercise of understand what is the thing we want to train the AI with. So it forces us to go through understand what was our DNA. And for an 800 people firm, it's not an easy decision either, right? So it started pushing many different buttons, which we're all really excited. And also now the question was how we can then capture knowledge on floor plans, on layouts, on grids, on technical, on material, and now also on a massive journey to trying to encapsulate that and democratize knowledge through the firm. And that for me is, yes, we can design some things faster, we can design it more complex, but for me, if we now be able to elevate everyone and give the same access to quality information, that's a fascinating, that's sort of the biggest trend we're latching on. We do not have any specific answers, we do have a lot of questions and a lot of fails, that's for sure. But this is the kind of things that now is not just improving certain things, it's creating completely new workflows.
Nice. Yeah, it's in a perspective view, like from it keep coming to my mind when I met Vishu, and the trends back then has changed so much, right? So, and one thing that is common in both of your talks is the question of democratizing and what's changing also in terms of society, right? So in terms of how we can deploy this for the larger public, and also the social impacts in terms of what it means for our social fabric. This is a very interesting times, really, of what is happening, right?
And also just to add on that, for me, is sort of our main goal as technology specialists or whatever sort of title we do have is to try to simplify technology to its core and remove the technical barrier, right? So that anyone can access complex simulations. Anyone can access incredible, well-crafted images, without having to spend a whole year learning Python. So how we can then now level up everything into it. So for me, the concept of democratization and lowering the tech barrier is the fundamental step that this technology might enable,
Sure thing. And either through that, and even with what Vishu also said about metaverse and all these spaces, right? That it will be amplified, right?
Yeah, that's what we're like. With the tools we have currently, a lot of people can create content, right? Like Instagram, YouTube. So even the discussion we are having now. So, but now, although it's like camera, we are sharing camera and audio, it could become more spatial, right? And that's kind of the exciting part. Like you're kind of sharing the same space, albeit virtually, and then trying to engage in a social conversation, and that's kind of exciting, like horizon, which is not really far off, and that's kind of super exciting for us, but also designers in general. So like there are more designers now working purely for the virtual, and that's also another opportunity which has opened up, along with like other specializations like AI and machine learning, which have also, so the repertoire for the architect has kind of kept increasing since so once AEC started adopting computation into its realm. So, and as the technology develops, there are more and more specializations, but there's also more and more tools available for people who are engaging with the various things to collaborate and do cool things. And that's kind of like, that's very exciting. And that part also brings in the stakeholder participation, and you don't need to be well versed with any CAD software to now participate in the design process, and that is really good for the client. And it also minimizes the time between what the architect is thinking and what the client wants. So it's become more and more collaborative between the various stakeholders, and that's kind of very exciting time to be in.
Definitely. Very exciting. I want to bring up a question that came from Diane, you know? What are the biggest challenges that you have had with technology in your profession? Starting maybe with you, German.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, of course, on the type of technology and the type of company and the type of audience that you do have. Every new technology has a hype cycle, a low value, and the moment of like a real value. And I think for us at least, one of the biggest challenges to first be able to be both positive about it and skeptical about it. So positive about it, like we believe, like okay, this new technology can potentially, let's explore how it can benefit us. But also on the other side of things, be able to say, okay, not allow the technology to drive you around, neither you to consume the hype, but rather really understand what is the underside and the underlying value that we can contribute to your core business. If your core business is to design incredible buildings, how this technology can always try to serve that and not just become a tool on its own, or like I think the AI sort of hype is a great example of that. We get excited with many different potential ideas. The real question is like, how can this add value to my process and not just ended up creating more garbage, but eventually just create noise? And I think now it's been a lot of, I would call it anxiety, like almost like digital technology tech anxiety, because it's been a lot flooring. And if you open LinkedIn on the social media, it's just like every day something new. 2 days ago, like they released Sora, and now everybody's going crazy with Sora, blah, 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 blah. And all my colleagues like, we should try it. And it's like, okay, what's the purpose? And I think the most important out of this, first, you understand what is your purpose, what is your core value of the business, and then how technology can try to solve or move the leverage on that. And then the second biggest challenge is, of course, mindset. I do feel like the most difficult thing to do is to try to implement something new that will force people to have to work differently. Most of the time, we're trying to consume a new technology and push it into an old workflow. And most of the times, a new type of pencil, a new type of tool will force you to put your hand in a different position or different speed or so on. But we forget that. we want to say, okay, it's a new type of software, and we want to use the same way that we use this other type of software. It doesn't work. And I think AI is also a great example of that. You need to be open you need to sort of I think the key here, at least for me, is to be able to de-learn certain things, take almost like a naive look and a brand new look into the technology and redefine the workflow based on this technology if it adds value to your process. The biggest crash is when you have a new technology and you're trying to fit it into an existing and sort of force it into an existing workflow. And that's when you have an architect saying, no, I hate Revit because it cannot have this, or I hate the AI because of that. So it needs to be a natural evolution. You need to be able to relearn. So I think, in sort of in conclusion, sounds like a cliche, but I think having an open mindset of certain things and to be able to de-learn and then have a fresh look to certain technologies is fundamental, which makes it really difficult because it means you need to have someone in the firm that is comfortable to exploring something completely new with all the things that means, but also knows how the workflows works, right? So be able to sort of do that sort of reinvention of the workflow and then walk the designers through the process. I don't know if it makes sense, but it's sort of like what my role has become somehow, to be that clutch between the wheel and the gear and the engine, and to be able to do that soft engagement into tech and then see how you can add value, right?
Definitely. Very challenging, right?
Yeah, kind of, second that thought in the sense that, it is, one is the kind of build the know-how as to what are the new technologies out there, and very important to have something called an observation time where you're trying to see where the technology is heading towards, right? So before jumping onto the bandwagon and trying to apply it, try to understand when to get in, right? And the third important part would be like kind of abstracting technological things into a way that it could be applied for design or architectural applications, and that is the more critical part. Like, it's also something German touched about. Like, there are technologies out there which are probably not developed specifically for any of the industries. It's coming from computer science or computer graphics, so on and so forth. But then we as computational designers, it becomes our job to kind of abstract what's going on with the new technology and how that could be applied into design workflows or architectural applications. And each of the offices or each one of us have our own take on that, and that brings what makes it unique. And but that's also the most difficult part, I would say, that how do we abstract it such that we can make use of it in a meaningful way for early stages of design or later stages of design or whatever is your application domain.
Nice.
And also, the second would be like, especially for the people who are coming into design technologies very recently. So the learning curve is also quite high because of, as what German was saying, there's like a lot of garbage out there, right? So you need to filter out what is actually good for you and then invest time into learning that. And that is a skill you only develop after a while of doing and failing. But that doing and failing takes a bit of time, and that is part of the learning curve. So it's a bit high on the learning curve because there's so many new technologies. But as you do and fail, you figure out, okay, where do I need to be an observer? Where do I need to get in and start implementing things? And that's a good skill to develop.
Sure. Just to share a bit of our side here at ArcGen, and it's very interesting because you guys bring the demand coming from an environment of architectural offices, right? So you at Zaha, Bishop Zaha in German, from your father too, right? So you and and from this architect's perspective, right? And what was curious about the Archigen history is that the demand for these solutions came from our clients. We even when we didn't have Archigen funded, the Brazilian banks came to us asking if we could develop something, a solution for them using these kind of technologies. Sometimes it comes from the people that already know, right? So it's nice to see the constellation of types of kind of how the demands come from the world and how we have to implement it in a meaningful way inside the workflow of the offices, or even as an Archigen here for our clients that come and ask for this kind of solutions. Nice. And on that point, in AI, you commented you guys are doing works with this. I would like you to comment a little bit more on what kind of works in terms of artificial intelligence are you experimenting in and making it more meaningful for the office and for the core business. How are you dealing with the artificial intelligence in this new trend of artificial intelligence there? Maybe German.
I will let Bishop to start with this one.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so like I think with everyone in the design industry, we also looked into like diffusion models like Midjourney, DALI 2, and Stable Diffusion, etc. We did early collaborations with Rafik and Adol to understand what's feasible, what kind of data sets would be required. So then once we started getting into it, we started developing our own kind of custom tools on top of it, and developing custom libraries and LoRa models, etc., which are relevant to our like data sets coming from the office, so that the outputs are relevant to what we are currently designing. It's not because we are like a design company, like the tools are becoming more of a quick renderer, where the designer wants to control what they're designing, but then give visualizations of what it would look like. And more importantly, it's also giving people of how to activate that space, right? The AI renderer is not only rendering the buildings and the details, but it also rendering people and how they activate that space. And that's quite interesting, because that is what we generally use to sell to clients as well, right? Like, how do people use these spaces? And this has become a bit more iterative now, using AI. So it's not per se like a design tool, but more of an aid to make decisions with also very quick rendering processes. So this has been already integrated into workflows within the office. Like, all of the design teams use them, and we have built custom tools both in all the softwares we typically use in the office, like Maya and Rhino, and people are already using it. The more speculative part of it, where we are trying to use AI, is what we call as game AI, where we are building architectural games with Unreal for Fortnite or other companies, where we want to learn the game mechanics of how people navigate the space or how people build their combinatorics. And that's where it's going into like a 3D realm, and that's where it's a bit more speculative now, because most of the AI currently, as we see in the design industry, is bit on the Gen AI side, looking at specifically at image-based things. But we want to kind of on a speculative side, we are also looking at the 3D side, how we can generate 3D, but also learn on the game mechanics side of things, because the office has been digitally native for like almost 30 years. So we have like a big archive of digital models to learn from. And that is where like language models would become very useful to learn the descriptors of geometry. And that's where we are currently putting our speculations into and working towards that.
Nice. How about you, Jimin?
Yeah. So I think we can sort of like perhaps divide it into two major or three major parts, right? Into the way we sort of either consume or create, or I would call it like machine learning workflows, right? So of course, like Vishu mentioned, sort of our journey started perhaps like 4 years ago with sort of the very, very early versions. So we started seeing the DALIs and the mid journeys, the version 1s, the versions 2. Even before that, with the 2017, with the sort of pix to pix sort of launching, right? That was the first time to say, okay, that was the first sort of image to image test to be able to say, okay, abstract colors into a render plan, which of course it was a disaster. It looks terrible. And then we tried to do landscape with it. It was a disaster. I did a thesis on that. So, but then it was really, really complex and cumbersome process. And you were like going through Python and Collabs and Jupyter notebooks and all that kind of stuff. And it was like really, really specific. And then we started now the diffusion models, and when Midjourney came around and DALI, it was like, oh wow, this also becomes a little more mainstream. And I started exploring a lot. So that sort of opens the door for us to say, okay, there is one path of custom in-house development that we never really have a really big R&D team to then focus on this. It was almost like trying to steal time away from a project and trying to push this. So then we started realizing, okay, let's cast a wide net of what are the platforms and tools out there. Let's be smart on how we use them, and how just with existing tools, we can really do a lot and deploy it to 100 people, right? So immediately was like, okay, how can we really try to control Midjourney? What's the real value for Midjourney for us, right? We started there. And then we started creating custom workflows in-house to teach people not to get crazy and just create billions of shit images, but rather say, okay, within our unique design process, let's say, for instance, of 8 weeks, cool. On week 2, you can spend extra like 3 hours on Midjourney and do this and this and this. Do the prompt in this way, do the batch, and that we call like, image exploration. So we have a material exploration workflow. We have a theme exploration workflow. And that's one that allows you to rapidly, really early in your project where you yet don't have geometry, to explore themes and potentially even share it with your client, not to get feedback. Say, okay, I'm more in line with this, I'm more in line with that. So all of a sudden it was like, wow, this is really interesting. Then of course we got, that was like many different tools. We started with Midjourney, and soon after the LookX of the world started appearing, right? Which all of a sudden now I say, okay, that was the first sort of version of the control nets, right? Okay, extract canny edges and depth maps, and then trying to extrapolate. So I think for the last 2 years, like 1 year ago, like the Midjourney and the LookX was our combo of consuming platforms, right? And then we did have the Magnific AI, which was the ultimate upscaler. And I hate them because they have such a good upscaler. We're trying to imitate it with our own custom process, right? But I think first we try to be clever about, okay, what are the tools out there and how we can uniquely, maybe not that uniquely, trying to look at them and implement into a process. And just the 3 of them actually get us really far. And it did some massive benefits to our projects, right? We also talk about Crea AI, we talk about a few others that we explore out there. And then while we started consuming that, and allow us to rapidly deploy to a lot of people in an informed manner, in a controlled manner, right, with rules and process behind it, we then started thinking, okay, we started finding limitations on these tools based on our unique way of doing things, and then we're trying to focus on fixing those limitations, creating a custom workflow. And as we started with Stable Diffusion Automatic 1111, and then when ConfUI pops, that was like, I like this. It feels natural for us working on Grasshopper, working on Dynamo, was visual scripting. And then we move away from like Python to then visual scripting. All of a sudden now we managed to open the gates of ComfUI instead of to like just 3 people, now to maybe 10 people or 20 people in the firm, because they will feel more comfortable working on a visual scripted environment, right? So Comfy for us become now that sort of, I call it like the grasshopper of diffusion workflow, right? Because then you can really do a lot of experimentation there. So our current journey is really into crafting multiple workflows on ComfUI with custom LoRa's and custom training to really fine tune this, and then be able to package it and teach people. So now we have a centralized server that deploys Comfy, and we have specific workflows and teach people how to do it. But we still consume other platforms like the Magnific AI. It still works really well as an upscaler. So that's there, and we use it. And then the last part is now industry collaborations. So one thing is consume, the other thing is create in-house and R&D, and the other thing is like, how can you leapfrog a lot? Now connecting with startups or other industries that they really need your feedback, and you really need to use them. So now we're connecting with a few other companies, and now we're on the cooking pot with testing and seeing. And this is something I think Zaha Hadid thrives at. It is the lead in the market, really to push in there. It's something that you can rapidly now leapfrog a lot, learn a lot, and move the needle really in a fundamental level. So I think for instance now on the industry collaboration is say, okay, let's join forces and see how this can become a beneficial win-win scenario, right? So I think that's in the fusion side is a lot. Then of course the ChatGPTs of the world are now sort of deploying ChatGPT on an enterprise level. It brought a lot of issues as well: security, IP, data ownership. It was like everybody got excited, let's use it, and then it was like, whoa, this project is confidential. What's happened with our information? Where is it? How is it treated, right? So I think we've all been there, and now we started learning, okay, how to really think about data, and who owns the data, and what is real data you want to maintain and not. So now we're also in that process of understanding how we can't, we are consuming large language models, we are consuming ChatGPT. In that case, we have sort of custom create our own ChatGPTs, and so on. But the question now is, all right, so we're sitting on so much information. We sit on a lot, but most of it is really unstructured and dispersed across many mediums, because we never really learned or realized how important all this separate data was. So now the question is trying to learn which data is important, which one do we need to bring, and then sort of saying, okay, which information now I want to be able to access to 100 people, because the technology allows you to do so. Doesn't mean that it's an easy task, because now you need to decide what is that information, what is the style you want to portray, you now becomes a political curation of information, which is a different problem. It's not technical, it's political, right? So I do feel like now the ChatGPTs and sort of like the global deployment and the enterprise deployment for us has been incredible to start creating custom versions of it, and like what Vishu was mentioned, we haven't yet also trying to jump into the more speculative or cutting edge side of saying, okay, how do we can now feed 3D models out of it, or maybe deconstruct 3D models into JSONs, into even, for instance, graph racks. So how we can now feed relationships. We do have probably, 1,000 Revit models, but we struggle to learn and extract information out of it. We have data, but we don't have information. So the journey now is to say, how do we go from data to information to knowledge? And I think we're consuming a lot of different platforms, like I mentioned. Now in-house is a lot of Comfy development, but then for the large language part, we now still we have more questions than actually solutions for it, to be honest. So that's sort of where we are.
Yeah, lots of challenges, right? Exactly. Like, it's very complex because it's really like that, right? the information's there's a lot of confidential or very confidential kind of information, and this data gets pulled to the cloud, and that is a very secure security kind of issue, right? And this connects to a question that we got here from Mauricio about the time that you guys see for the office to spend on these kind of efforts in technologies. I know that at Zaha, Vishu here has a computational team to do these things, and his work is mainly to do that. But as you said, you take these technologies and make it available for all the other teams, right? And about and the difference with you at big German, how does it work there in terms of time to experiment with these tools? How is that process of adopting these technologies, and in order to in connecting to everything that we talked about in terms of democratizing and making it available in a meaningful way to the team? So how is the approach for big? And then I want to know if Zaha, and also I want to know also the newer things, because I left Zaha at almost 10 years ago, so I might be outdated.
I think maybe from big side, and look, I'm relatively new also at big, so I'm also learning a lot of things how do you operate, right? But I do believe, like, and I really enjoy this sort of motto. I would say that, from projects to global, right? In the sense of, like, we're always trying to ground things on the project and innovate from the project up, and then encourage all the people in the project, independently of the role that you do have. If you're a computational designer or being lead on the project or PM, it's like there always needs to be a component of innovation of a 1% or a 5%. And then from that, we then have, a net that allows us to then catch those sparks of innovation that happens in the project, and then understand that some of these things can now be replicated in other projects and can be elevated and becomes a tool or an application or a script that then gets captured and then shared globally. A good example of that is like when we have a master plan project, and then we ended up testing a few things on the project itself through computational methods, and then suddenly it's like, cool, that now is becoming sort of the master planning tool set that now can actually be used on a global level. And it's almost got it from the ground up. So innovations that really happen that way, and at least that's also how I've been operating on the Barcelona office, that I've been always involved in all the projects, wearing multiple hats, either from BIM and computation, visualization, and AI, and then always pushing something on a project, testing it, breaking it, and sometimes it was a fail, sometimes it was a win, and then when it becomes a win, that becomes sort of like, okay, let's repeat this on this other project. Then from multiple projects, that becomes almost like an office standard and potentially a big standard to be repeated, right? So AI was a little bit of that. I started testing AI on different things in multiple different projects, and then we then sort of say, okay, let's test in all projects in Barcelona, and we have a huge success on multiple fronts. And now we're elevating that to a global office, to all the offices at big. Let's replicate this workflow. Let's do this. Let's do that, right? Which is super interesting. So this is something that is working with us, but also I think it's still important when you elevate something from a project up, then be able to have a specific R&D component or department that they can take that process, package it, complexize it, go deeper into the technical, and then do that. So we do have a small sort of R&D team that then managed to take these global initiatives and then either deploy it on a global level, right? That's sort of like what is been working for us. But always grounded from the learnings of the project, I would say.
Yeah, the ZHA, so it's like for us, it is not, it's not fully, so we are a practice embedded research team. So that means whatever research we do has to have application into architectural design or architectural projects, and this, like, so the research is developed through multiple stages. It's not so we do collaborative things with various partners in various domains. Like, it could be related to geometry, it could be related to AI, it could be related to fabrication. So like, our goal is to kind of build up that research, but at the same time it can't be very theoretical or very abstract, right? It's not like an academic research where purely for academic reasons. It is more of how we can position that in what the day-to-day working of the office. So in that regard, so once as the research matures, it becomes very important for us to showcase how the technologies we have been developing. You could be developing like the most best practice thing, but if there is no practical application, it doesn't dwell well in the setup of the office. So we need to showcase how these technologies can be applied in architectural projects. Maybe it might not transfer one-to-one. So what you did as a research project might not go one-to-one into a commercial project, but there will be some bits of it which will then propagate or get developed because of the practical application you're working towards. And that becomes an important feedback loop. So once you apply, you understand more problems, then you figure out, okay, how can we make this better? So what can we look at? And this happens for all the domains. It is like whether it is geometry, AI, game technologies, or fabrication related things. And that's been like also the fun part of having to do research in a office environment, is because you're facing real problems, and you're trying to solve these real problems using the technologies at hand, and which gives you interesting results. And then once you see what the application is and what the problems are, you can then always go back and make it better so that you can improve it and use it in the next project. So because of office of about 500 people, there are about 40-50 projects going on at a given time. So that means you can, on a given typology, whether it's master plan, infrastructure projects, or museum or cultural projects, so we can quickly test on multiple of these typologies to see what we are developing is actually useful or not. If it is not useful, then we shelve it for a while, and then try to focus on something which will be useful. And that's a good reality check to have, so that your research gets more refined and more application specific.
Nice. And just something that came to my mind now, and I want to add to this topic, is another perspective that we got here from Archigen, from our clients, actually. So one thing that I can see throughout the big work and also Zaha is that you kind of test it yourselves, right? There is a certain attitude towards technology, and you even have targets, right, German? As like, well, some the projects they have to be innovative in some way at certain criteria, right? And so something that we got from our clients that happens, something that we discovered here is that, well, something that's kind of obvious. Big corporations, they have a lot of problems to bring innovations to inside, right? So they must, here in Brazil, this is something that they are having here. They have this technology innovation department where they bring startups and other players to bring innovation and to better processes and everything. And this is kind of different, right? We don't see that innovation department working in architectural offices such as Zaha and Big. This is part of the work that you guys do, right? And even though it's a big office, right? So Germany, you're saying that Big has 800 people right now?
Yeah, I think it's maybe 850. Not
Wow.
too sure.
And Zaha, I was there like last 2 months ago, something like that. We were like 500 people, right?
Yeah, we are about 500, 520 now, I think.
And that's big. And when companies get big, innovation can be a problem, right? Because you get used to the old patterns of how to do things, and to innovate. And so, on the other perspective, our clients, some of them, they have these innovation departments that they look for startups such as us to bring them to bring innovation to their work, right? So this is a kind of a different approach, which was kind of nice.
Mhm.
And on that line, do you guys see differences in how innovation is taking? I mean, we've been talking about the speed of innovation in architecture, and do you see differences in this speed across multiple countries? Do you see differences in accepting these innovations or the appetite for innovation? Or, as you guys come from global, it's a global office, right? You guys do projects everywhere. So I want you guys to comment on that. Is there any differences in taking innovation on the clients around the world?
Yeah, so typically, like any new innovation, any new technologies which are coming in to showcase application on a project, typically takes about 4 to 5 years. So like, from the time you develop this technology to kind of first start seeing its first applications on a project, typically takes about 4 to 5 years. Like things recently now we are getting more and more buildings which are 3D printed. But 7 8 years ago, it was a novel technology still coming up, and it had to go through all the testing, and that testing part is what making it feasible for the environment or the market it's going to be in is what uh, differs from country to country. Some countries will who are invested in it might pick it up much faster, and other countries might be much more skeptical. There might be in the observation period, they want to see whether this will survive, and then go into the testing, and then it becomes mainstream. And so it depends on from country to country. So for mm, but from recent project experience, it's mostly like things move very fastly in projects in China because they're building really fast, and then there is the labor force which is helping them build that fast, but they've also accepted new technologies which is also enabling them to build as fast as they do. And same would be like US and Europe centers. They were already well versed in, like a bit more advanced in fabrication technologies, and they are a bit more open to uh, I would say research, but not so much on the testing and making it mainstream. That takes a longer time in Europe or in the UK. Uh, but like in as compared to China, it goes pretty fast. And yeah, India is also another new market which is upcoming. We can see some glimpses of technology adaptation, which is kind of exciting. I think in the next few years to come, there'll be like a rapid growth in that market as well.
I think mostly from my side, I can mostly speak from my experience at Big Barcelona, right? We do serve a specific sort of region, right? I'm quite sure that if I get to speak with someone or Biag itself, it will tell you like it will potentially tell you all the differences globally, which is fascinating, right? Because mostly like we do have buildings all over. I do feel like each country does really have its own nuances and local conditions, which it makes every project really unique, and also makes the work of an architect to really focus on localizing your architecture and not just bring generic designs, but really like understanding the local constraints. by all means, I mean, in all fronts, from material availability through regional climatic situations, what materials are available, sources, constraints, which kind of construction techniques do they use? And then that's sort of the typical, but also understand what is the technology consumption, on which technology do operate better, how do they operate on projects? And then you do find some countries that maybe the technology adoption is lower, but they build still really fast and they fast track everything, because while the forge is for you to be designing the ground floor and they're already casting the foundation for the basement 3, right? And it's fascinating, right? I worked 8 years in Africa, especially in South Africa. And for me, the experience was fascinating, right? Because the technology adoption in some areas was low. But then we as a firm, when I was working in my previous firm in South Africa, our technology consumption was really high. And we have really well developed BIM processes, which was like, sometimes we collaborate with other people from London, and they were like, wow, this is coming from Africa. Yes, of course, it's coming from Africa. People tend to generalize that all of a sudden now in Africa there is not much development, but there is. So each country really has its own differences, not just in the technology, but how do they approach technology, how do they use it, how do they build and construct. We do have a lot of experience now on Spain, France, Italy, and so on. And we start also on the Middle East region. And it's so different a type of approaches. Some of this one takes more time and is more regulated. Some of this ones all of a sudden is like, cool, let's go. And then after a month, you're going to start thinking about construction documentation, which I do find really interesting, because you as a firm need to be able to adapt to all of these different scenarios. And also trying to create a company benchmark that's set to the highest standards and meet the highest requirements of your client and that country. And then when you move to another country that has maybe lower, help your client to build that standard up, you know, and together deliver a project to the highest standard, but never decrease the standard of the project in terms of processes or technology. And I think now moving into more advanced way of constructing, when you started thinking about digital fabrication, which of course, you know, Saha has been is a pioneer on that. We did have some really interesting collaboration now with Icon, with the New York office that did a lot. And for me, it was fascinating what the team was sort of showcasing the process and how you even need to start hacking Revit to be able to do walls differently, because the way you need to design and document for 3D printing is completely different, right? And then you have Revit, which is like, it doesn't want to do a chamfer little wall. All the walls want to finish at 90 degrees, but the 3D printed path doesn't work that way. And this happens in Mexico. So now, sometimes with new technologies, you can even eventually leapfrog a lot, right? And sort of the typical conversion was like, you know, the US went and installed all of these cable lines, and also Africa didn't. And then 10 years later, Africa just jumped into the mobile system, and they saved billions of just building a massive network. And that's sort of when a certain technology allows you to leapfrog something really specific. And 3D printing, I don't think is yet sort of that mainstream, of course, but it has this glimpse of being able to now bring a high technology environment to local context and really push that boundary, right? But I get, at least myself, we get to enjoy really the fun part of all of this is to be able to find all the localities and the uniqueness of each region, sort of deconstructed, and understand how they can actually be used to greater use and not become a challenge. You know, it becomes actually an opportunity on either in technology or materials or anything, right?
Nice. Yeah, just to share some perspective here from Brazil. Brazil is not like China, where people, as you said, like, and from experiences, as Vishu was talking about, like, they are so crazy about speed, right? So they are just, sometimes they don't even have the plan, and they start building from a render. It's a crazy thing. So Brazil is not that super fast, but it's kind of in the middle. So here we see these companies, big companies, having this appetite for innovation. So they look for innovation, and they are open to test things here in Brazil. So just to share a perspective here from a difference from Brazil and to the other countries, right? And coming to an end here, you guys have some 15 minutes to close up here the conversation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So one last question here, as we are celebrating the Architects Day here in Brazil. What do you think would be a meaningful tip for architects that are listening to this podcast, and in terms of technology and coming from your experience and how to be active as architects and mixing innovation in architecture and bringing it forward in a meaningful way to architects? So I want you guys to comment on that.
Yeah, like from my side, it would be like I also previously mentioned is that it's important to kind of understand what technology is better for the application you're trying to do. So currently, if the trend is for AI, it doesn't mean AI is better at solving all your problems. So you need to, like, if it is possible to do as effectively or much faster in a regular algorithmic computational way, then we should make an informed decision to do that. Like, it should not be, we shouldn't get carried away with the buzzwords to say and showcase, try to solve problems which the technology might not be great at it. Or so building an understanding of what technology is useful based on the application domain is kind of a very useful tip which I got, and I would like to communicate that to the people who are listening here, because not everything you hear is gold. So be careful in what you want to choose.
Lovely. How about you, Juman?
For me, the funny thing is, when I got asked this question maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would tell like, hey, if you're on the technical space of architecture, learn Python. I was going with that to say like one single thing they're trying to push, it opens the door and they'll be able to become the central sort of backbone of many different things. And then now, after seeing many things, after experiencing many things, and after even the last quote from NVIDIA CEO saying the future goal of NVIDIA is to kill coding, and nobody will obviously have to learn coding. So I'm not saying don't learn Python. I'm saying I think it's difficult now to say do this. Learn this tool or learn this platform, because whatever you say probably in 6 months will change completely on a year and 2 years. I think now what is stands fundamentally true for me is rule number 1. Curiosity and creativity is front and center. If you're not curious and have a level of, you can train creativity, but if you're not curious and constantly ask yourself, how can I explore this differently? Then doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter technology, you will not be there to explore it or to ask the question. Now is the time to ask new questions, and that's fundamentally, and that part comes out of curiosity. My sort of rule or motto is anything that I do, I always allow myself 5 minutes saying, can I do this differently? And think if I can explore it. And through all those little 5%, they come great things. So one point I was like, on Instagram, I was like, shit, I spend too much time on this thing. And then I delete it, and I make a rule to myself, every time I want to open Instagram, I will force myself to open ChatGPT with no purpose. So after the next day, I was like, I wanted to open Instagram. I just opened ChatGPT with no purpose. And I started exploring ChatGPT on completely weird ways and explore a whole new horizon of ChatGPT for me. It was like, wow. So it's a weird thing, but I think you can now, it's not about technical, it's about soft skills or attitude. And I think curiosity is always there to say, I'm an architect. How can I improve my building through artificial intelligence on rendering, on this, on that, and that, and then be able to do that? So I think a lot of things will be facilitated by AI, but will never be replaced. By no means is our attitude, our aptitude to stay curious and to connect things in unique ways, right? And to ask sort of new questions. And if you do that exercise, you ended up really quickly finding a new way to do parametric floor plans assisting with ChatGPT and this and that. So you will be driving the search and finding the technologies that you need, and not the opposite, that you ended up consuming a technology that you don't need.
Lovely. And just to complement a little on that, I think, you guys are totally right. It's very wise words. Despite of architecture being kind of traditionally more kind of not very open to innovation, we are here coming from backgrounds, from places that really push innovation, right? And as Vishu said, buzzwords happens, and we have to be, as German said, very cautious and also curious about it, right? And one thing that I want to mention here from the perspective of the experience here at ArcGen is about opportunities too. Sometimes we do things and we follow paths that we don't know where it's going to end up. Like for me, it's very clear that I did like parametric designs in Zaha when I was there. And I didn't know it would lead to something for the opportunities that came to me and Thomas here in Brazil. So there was clients coming and asking for solutions which matched perfectly on that field, right? So I could take all of this experience and bring it forwards in these opportunities. So be open, being curious, being very asking questions on how you're managing this and putting it in a path in your life is really important, and that reflects what you are as an architect and your values, and there is opportunities for that, right? So what we see now is innovation and a lot of opportunities. So this is something that I want to emphasize from this side here in Brazil. Brazil is kind of a third world country, but there's a lot of opportunities, and humankind hasn't discovered everything. So we have the mission to bring forward more innovation and more quality in architecture, and I think you guys are a testimony of that too, right? We're coming to the end here of this podcast. You guys have made this Architects Day here in Brazil in this year even more special. We thank you a lot for your time and this talk here. And I want to also thank everyone that is watching this podcast. Hope this has brought lots of insights and some from the experience of us and Vishu and German especially. And just want to give you the final words for you guys.
Many thanks for the invite. It's been a pleasure talking with you and also with German here. And happy Architecture Day for all of the people listening. It's something I came to know about it today. So there's like a Architecture Day, which is kind of cool. And hope you guys have fun.
Yeah, same. Thanks for actually preparing this and celebrating the day in such an interesting way. An encouragement, to redefine our profession for the good, right? To elevate it and see how our work can also elevate the way we live and the buildings we design. So I think it's the work that you guys are doing on ArcGen is part of that, to make everything more livable and better experience. So thanks a lot.